Like Princess Acerola, I'm going to work on expressing my negative emotions too. Kaka. Anyway, the Acerola Bon Appetit arc is over. It was brief, but that's not surprising given the length of the original story. I've already read the light novel, so I wanted to focus today on how this was adapted into an anime. And I'm gonna mix in a bit of criticism, though overall I still enjoyed the entire thing. As we all know, this is Shinobu's origin story, and I'm glad that they put in a lot of effort into showing how Detopia's mannerisms affected how Shinobu would come to act by the time we meet her in Kizu Monogatari. Aside from the very deliberate CBA therapy, even the way Detopia sits is very reminiscent of how Shinobu positions herself. I also really liked how they showed us Detopia's regression over time with each death. Whenever she was shown in her throne, she got smaller and smaller. You'd notice it even before she became a full-fledged child. It was very clever to use the chair as a basis for comparison. Even more so than the last episode, this one emphasized the theme of transition, appropriate given that we'll be transitioning into another arc, and of course Princess Acerola would be transitioning into her next phase as a vampire. I like the way Kishshot opened her eyes once her name was decided upon, as if she was just then being born or made. I thought this was an interesting choice though, considering she didn't have the idea to become a vampire at this point. But after some consideration, I guess it does make sense given what happens next. After all, it's through Tropicalesque's death that Shinobu even gets the idea to become a vampire. And this is the transition that this arc has been working towards this entire time. Now, when they discuss turning her into a vampire, Detopia and Shinobu make their way up the stairs to Detopia's throne. This wasn't necessary and it certainly didn't happen in the novel, but I thought it was very meaningful because we'd always seen Tropicalesque at those steps. Shinobu was taking on his position in a way by asking to be made into a thrall. So it made sense for her to walk the steps that he'd frequented, but of course, she walks beyond the point he was always positioned at, stepping onto even ground with Detopia by the end. During the moments before Detopia attempts to turn the princess into a vampire, Corpse Castle also begins to fall apart. At first I wondered why they did this. Even if it looked cool, it didn't make much sense to me in the moment. But I think the castle has long been a symbol for fairy tales. Just look at the Disney logo. But this fairy tale is reaching its end. The collapse of Corpse Castle is another visual representation of Shinobu's transition from Princess Beauty into the vampire Kishshot. And this concludes our journey. But not this video. Because I really wanted to talk more about Tropicalesque. Most of my complaints about this arc's adaptation have to do with the treatment of his and Detopia's characterization and relationship. I know that the tone is much more serious in the novel. They play it pretty straight, similar to how Kizumonogatari took on a more serious tone overall. The characters stay consistently in the same style, the imagery is consistently dark and gothic, etc., etc. But I did miss the humor, and it wasn't just for the sake of the humor either. The humorous conversations between Tropicalesque and Detopia, as well as her internal monologue, which was hilarious, really helped establish how deep their relationship was. I think losing out on their interactions actually hurt the narrative in some ways. When Detopia realized that Tropicalesque was gone, it simply didn't hit as hard. And I think that's because the relationship felt colder than it did in the light novel. I did appreciate what they tried to do by cutting to the stairs the moment Detopia woke up to highlight the fact that he wasn't in his usual place and she'd noticed. I also liked that there was a callback to stepping on him, but it didn't have the bittersweet feeling that it did in the novel. I think they could have expressed the pain of Detopia's loss by holding longer on Shinobu in the moment Detopia realizes what's happened. It would have been interesting to emphasize her grief more, showing how painful it must have felt to realize that by taking in one child and forming another attachment, she was responsible for the loss of her first beloved child. It was also a bit disappointing that they left it at just Shinobu's brief summary of why Detopia was eating Tropicalesque. In the novel, she has a beautiful line. Detopia says, "I'm taking him into my body, into my heart. I'm accepting him inside me." Though it's a thought and not expressed out loud, they've had no problem with her verbalizing other unspoken thoughts. I wish something like that had been kept in. But as I said, overall the adaptation was very good for what it set out to do. I think the focus was so much more on Detopia and Shinobu's relationship that Tropicalesque probably wasn't a priority. I imagine that's why he wasn't drawn as pretty as he could have been either. This was my least favorite arc from the season so far, but that doesn't mean in any way that it was bad. As usual, the animation quality was beautiful, with the music setting the mood perfectly for each scene, and the story was very focused, with a lot of attention paid to details to emphasize the points they wanted to highlight. I think this might also be interesting to view as a standalone. It would probably be easy enough to follow as its own story, actually, even without the context of the main series. But let me know what you think of this arc as a light novel reader or as an anime only viewer. I'm really curious if other people share my opinions on this.